How to save the world. How to make our leaders loving, just, and peaceful. Hi, I'm Steve Race. I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as soon as I could. So you'll just have to tolerate a little drawl, y'all. Or would you rather put up with a far northern accent, like the late Senator Hubert Humphrey, who greeted his audiences with, "I'm proud as punch to be here tonight." At least I don't sing the sweet, syrupy song of East Texas piney woods, like our beloved former First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson. To beautify America, everyone plant a tree, a shrub, or a bush. And if you see a gum wrapper on the highway, pick it up and send it to Lyndon. Lyndon collects gum wrappers. I dedicate my speeches to my late father and wonderful mother, who both always loved to care for and seek just fair treatment for everyone they could. William and Catherine Race sparked this lonely little nerd's obsession for demanding that the whole world learn to love like that. And come to think of it, I'm equally grateful to my brother Charles and sister Susan for never stopping their efforts to help me towards sensible self-care, or my claims of love for anybody, much less everybody else, would never amount to a hill of beans. I'm a nurse. When I take off the stethoscope, you are my patient, my teacher, and the one I love. But I have noticed, whenever I start foaming at the mouth, a person's smile freezes, one eye twitches, and they edge slowly for the door. Take a long break after one of these long speeches. Most democratic constitutions require governments to enforce civilized national equivalents of God's, man's, and especially women's family laws. But then most leaders instead absolutely savage their founders' rules of equality and steal their people's choice of peace or war by accepting bribes from mercenary oligarchs to steal our money, to ruin our national defense, to endlessly start and make us fight attacking wars for their profit alone. Excuse me. My speeches present and prove your cases to federal courts to enforce your nation's constitution, only possible by prohibiting every gift dollar to politicians and returning war power to the people and ordering obedience to your nuclear non-proliferation treaty to destroy, not spread, weapons of mass destruction. I only discover truth you have always known since your own nation's revolutionary genesis, that leaders' power to harm us may be removed by alert, ethical, committed citizens. Let me toot my own horn a second. Stay with me, and I'll tell you exactly how to fire those private business dictators and replace them with kind, caring, honest public servants. Most of us, blessed with wise, loving parents, have never forgotten and carry on their divine, clear, democratic, peaceful, humane equality, justice, respect, care, peace, and all that unconditional love of family law, which is every child, weak or strong, and every woman too, must receive protection of their equal voice and opportunity. Parents may not favor one child over another just because of differing talents to please adults. No bullying will be allowed, and certainly no sticks, rocks, or other weapons used to injure. As I said, most constitutions require those very rules of larger society's humanity for your leaders, i.e., free, uncorrupted elections and universal equality of citizens not to be stolen by powerful competitors, and optimum safety and national defense, excluding our own external aggression, which is always returned to wreck our own security, not to mention solvency. Since all republics claim that they ended the obvious abuse of monarchies, do they actually obey these family love and constitutional justice laws? Well, you don't make 'em, so they break 'em. At 5 minutes until midnight, we must get busy with a legal program to force our governments to obey their highest and clearest laws of care and protection, of equality, respect, justice, and love. Now, according to one little fella's obsession anyway, there is only one specific set of legal enforcements and revisions that will save the world your children must have. So, stay tuned. Our talks, our true beliefs, goals, and actions are the federal court cases and international negotiations you and I will work on and bring to fruition. Let's go over the divine, human, democratic laws of love and their critical, modern adaptations and enforcements you can and must sell and effect to make your leaders and fellow citizens loving, just, and peaceful. Then please try and don't stop, because you have not heard of another way to save your loved ones and children. Our key is legally ending the corrupt bribery and war promotion of business over government. For 2 million years, men were fathers and lovers only, and never tyrants and murderers. Then quite suddenly we confused new technologies for game animal prey and invented war to satisfy similar instinctive appetites. Ever since, military and commercial power elites and growing weapons factories bribed leaders to buy war's soldiers and weapons with our taxes, thus murdering close to 1/2 billion of us throughout the next 10,000 years. Now, we will either enforce and expand the laws of our ethical, loving families and our just, peaceful constitutions to end the bribes and eliminate arsenals and armies above necessary police and border security, or humanity will endure our last few decades in wars raging over every ambition and hatred, further exploding in depression and desperation for food and water, until we scorch or freeze our every single soul with final nuclear holocaust, just as most of another million sick from lawless technology, galactic civilizations did before us. We didn't listen when God told us to pound our swords into plowshares. And now our weaponized to the moon, overstressed earth and population needs every weapon dollar and war worker and fighter to stop killing and start saving us instead. Those other million worlds now slaughtered and silenced were all warned too, but were too busy to listen or too discouraged to legally muscle aside their mixed-up, selfish supervisors. Now only you and I can save our world. Only we, not some other vague, responsible authorities, can make our leaders loving, just, and peaceful. I begin with a minute from my video about drug addiction, and then transition to the world tragedies of political bribery and militarism, our main topics of how to save the world, and how to defeat those conspiracies. Thoughtful listeners must challenge my emphasis on personal power's answer to addiction illness. So, Steve, does not much of our sick, tragic world overflow with hundreds of millions of dying addicts, many desiring, even attempting your vaunted rational exercise and dominance? But in fact, aren't they mostly chained to an entire toxic environment of savage violence and desperate poverty, too overwhelming to simply will their way out of? Yes. For example, Haiti is now overrun with pushers, beggars, and thieves, mostly hooked on a murderous cocktail of heroin, cocaine, and street supplies of a horse sedative. Many have giant infected ulcers crawling with feasting bugs. They continue to inject the drugs outside of destroyed veins, straight into the pus-oozing, gangrenous, bone-deep mess, until an emergency amputation adds a few months to their still doomed lives. When interviewed for television, several expressed profound sadness and condemnation of their own depravity, and fully described each iron-bound link of their sick chemical and societal compulsions. Drug convictions reduced opportunity for honest work from scarce to scant. But hey, they found and punished the guilty offenders who deserved their terminal trap, not recovery, right? And gangs keep killing to defend their livelihoods of hooking the city's young, sending American kids deadly drugs, and importing our assault weapons. Some of these addicts, not many, find superhuman courage to withdraw, and occasionally are helped to recover some modest, healthy, legal work and home life with loved ones. Now, child refugees from several Central American nations with similar narco-depression are flooding over our border. Fleeing from gang wars and poverty, our guns and addicted customers only worsen. On television, I heard several Haitian addicts and dealers elegantly express, with their still surviving but impotent higher minds and hearts, their moral and practical lessons of active chemical compulsion creating their hell on earth most knew they would die from before any rare chance to break free. The very few who manage to detox and find scarce medical, social, and vocational help sometimes recover the intelligence and character to get and stay well. Of course, a particular nation with immense riches and a certain responsibility is way too cash-strapped after spending trillions on distant invasions and World War III's worldwide arsenal to provide more than a pittance for failed little countries like Haiti. And besides, don't we support third world economies by buying their dope and selling them street-handy assault weapons? Thought their cartels were big and bad, did ya? Besides, what's a little collateral damage so long as our public and private bosses with the pull and the power stay in the money, honey? Most citizens of this earth admit, in rare moments of cynical, helpless honesty, that ruling evil ideas have yet to even be challenged, much less defeated by good, loving activists, citizens, or leaders. I believe that it is not any devil or original sin, but our own instinctive, addictive tendencies, twisted by technology and power, confused for survival requirements, that rules modern leaders. Critical survival activities, hunting and killing for food, and sexual intercourse for procreation, elicit bursts of delightful cerebral dopamine, our ancient passion and desire to do it again. War began when new technology offered many new avenues to capture, dominate, and thrill to victory over other humans. Rushes of possessive economic and military power without humane constraints or controls, often enjoyed by harming or killing for imagined advantages. Each greedy seizure chain reacted for the next, the same dopamine trap of my drug addiction, till I found and enforced my control or law of abstinence. Now I have 100 times the dopamine, and I'm 100th the dope, which still ain't saying much. All I communicate to you are the controls needed to remove national and international evil opportunities, creating new citizens and leaders' dopamine bursts from new habits, identical to their family care and joy, of publicly loving and helping each other, ironically delivering far and wide more riches, power, and pleasure than the compulsive robbers and warriors ever got even once in a blue moon. Plus, we get to live instead of die. From the moment failed hunters ended 2 million years of archaeology-proven peace by killing the first farmers for food, patriarchy replaced man-woman leadership, and then 10,000 years of tyranny and war raged, from monarchies to attempts at democratic republics consistently ruined by corrupt commercial and military dominance of government men. Courts must soon rule for public equality, justice, and peace to reverse humanity's rush to extinction. In the meantime, the richer developed nations, led by my America, amass doomsday arsenals and fight wars of conquest and paranoid defense of nuclear bomb monopoly, burning 100 times the resources needed to treat, often heal, and put to gainful employment most drug addicts on the planet. National constitutions assign a military mission of defense and safety, not worldwide aggression and genocidal menace. Let's research my hope that federal courts are not even a fraction as business corrupted as presidents, senators, and congressmen, or else our final check and balance before Armageddon is gone, baby, gone. Politicians legally steal our taxes for industrial friends, delivering weapons and other contracts for bribes. Oh, I mean, contributions. Our children's $18 trillion debt went for war. Every cent of it. Do the math. Most of that deficit was accumulated during 4 wars of aggression, not defense, during the last 20 years, when we averaged borrowing about 1/4 of each budget, while spending closer to 1/3 of the total on history's greatest invasion war-fighting machine. Legislators and presidents have unanimously opposed public campaign finance for decades, because restoring our constitution's one man, one vote, equal power for the unconnected democracy would cut off their dirty money to buy way more TV commercials than less gifted, grafted challengers can possibly afford. Were the contest fairly decided by equal time public service proposals debates, incumbents would win less than 2/3, not the current 96% of elections. Such hope and change, utterly unacceptable to the public careers augmenting private riches and power players. Competition on equal footing? Why, they'd be terrified, thinking, Voters, no longer mentally vaporized by our extra incumbent propaganda advantage, would likely force us to stop abrogating our treaty, requiring us to stop driving Earth's bomb race to extinction, and make us relinquish the riches we scarf by borrowing the rest of America towards inevitable bankruptcy. Our elite, destructive oligarchy would suffer disaster upon catastrophe. Next thing you know, they'd force us to obey our Constitution's requirement that a government of just laws, not us greedy little men, actually provide for the common defense, not an uncommon genocidal offense, and promote the people's general public welfare. No longer only and always our private corporate crony welfare. Surely you can't ask our comfy, conniving, cruel, cancerous class, after arranging public theft and universal slaughter for 10,000 years, to suddenly lead kind lives without our addictive pleasures? Why, the people's best would come to our worst. They'd be high-fiving that our loss is all humanity's gain. In fact, salvation. At the height of the Cold War, actually hot enough to kill tens of millions in direct or proxy wars armed by the giants, the Weapons Corporation General Dynamics maintained offices for political action, that is, government lobbying and payoffs, in every one of the 435 congressional districts, naturally achieving dominance of the war tax contract competition and further rocketing our national budget to 70 cents of every dollar for international murder. As soon as federal courts restore our Constitution by simply outlawing every single private nickel gifted to public servants, our newly, freely elected leaders will obey our treaty for nuclear disarmament and pass laws against civilian targeted attack armies, ultimately replacing with mutually safe border defenses. Then, empowered voters will choose the best of beautiful plans of loving care, no longer limited to corrupt, murderous lies. We would vote for human priorities within balanced, affordable budgets. Candidates actually planning to serve us for a generous salary only, no longer fortune hunting for themselves and their sponsor parasites feeding on our U.S. Treasury, would surely appropriate major public health programs to address bad diet, deficient exercise, and tobacco addiction, as well as universal self-psychology to defeat drug addiction, not limited to reliance on religion. Such programs could together rescue our laboring sick care system and vast suicidal populations. Pennies from every dollar no longer funding weapons and forces of worldwide attack and slaughter would support new industries proud to hire recovered addicts. But why listen to some weirdo peace queer? After all, I couldn't possibly have been inspired by heavenly command. Thou shalt pound thy swords into plowshares. Or guided by a God of love? A Prince of Peace? Of course not. What were you thinking? By this principle, an international treaty against genocidal militarism would allocate former death money, a small fraction of super military budgets, to help economies of the poorest nations, diminishing their desperate narcotics exports and cartel munitions imports. Recent reports detail massive ongoing droughts in North and South America, likely global warming's future catastrophes arriving early. The world's recent descent into emergency long-term water shortages, only due to worsen as global warming intensifies, raises our imperative. How else will 9 to 10 billion Earthlings survive without crash construction of an expensive world coastal network of desalination plants? Without an end to bribery forcing massive war budgets spent on uncontrolled weapons manufacture, try finding even a nickel for every dollar needed for a new ocean of water without the salt. Swords into plowshares, folks. Starting yesterday. Pretty sharp, that Old Testament God. Only in the last couple of years has it become apparent that giant northern and southern latitudes are rapidly changing from plentiful rainfall, fertile breadbaskets, to scant precipitation near deserts, thanks to global warming, now confirmed connected to the huge, unprecedented, man-caused CO2 atmosphere spike, now locked in for 100 years, despite too little, too late efforts to control. By the way, I heard a recent radio report outlining that we have reached 600 parts per million of CO2, whereas all the previous fluctuations for several million years were between 200 and 400 parts per million. So forget Russia's denials. Global warming is real. Unless the giant military trillions are quickly tapped to build a world desalination capacity up to need, pumping or carrying uphill to mortally deficient billions, the resulting thirst, famine, and food wars will quickly become humanity's hell on earth to exceed even most nuclear war survival nightmares. Those also all the more likely from frantic, failed, genocidally armed leaders. Swords into plowshares, old Steve's nutty, frivolous dream, or God's final warning. Another recently discovered cause of droughts, deforestation. Forests hold massive moisture that wafts upward, turning into rain clouds. Only replanting all the forests we have raised will normalize rainfall to any degree. The rest of our recovery awaits the next century beyond a permanent halt to our excessive CO2 and production and critical limits to the population explosion. Might trillions slated for World War III be diverted to expensive, urgent seawater desalination? Or should we try drinking gunpowder and uranium? Peace is won and survival assured, not by aggressive, preemptive foreign wars that spawn 100% of our terroristic enemies, but by defeating evil, violent, or environmental threats against people. By the way, news reports on those massive droughts in many locations are mounting. I've heard about bone-dry wells, even reservoirs, completely dust. People in cities now turn on their faucets for days at a time, spitting dust, not water. In several South American huge cities, this happens periodically. The United States, since World War II, has driven more nuclear and conventional bomb stacking than the rest of the planet combined, helping to weaponize more than 200 wars, directly killing many millions, mostly civilians, of course. Whether leading or being dragged, kicking and screaming, American actions and resources will determine the fate of the earth. Signatories of a true swords into plowshares treaty would agree, along with nuclear disarmament and aggressive invasion potential elimination via most conventional force disarming and disbanding, would also agree to eliminate economy-wrecking government borrowing, prosperity being the essential political lure to spread the treaty worldwide, and require an end to each nation's private campaign cash given to candidates or leaders, eliminating most corporate pressure to magnify international war building on our dime, or in fact, trillion. Soon, booming peace economies and leaders devoted to constituent care instead of corporate coddling would actually provide 100 times more of each Constitution's promised public support of our lives, liberties, and pursuit of happiness than 10 millennia of war governments and thus crippled economies ever did. Governments deep into life and public health, not death and fattening oligarchs, would worsen the ominous crisis of outrageously high life expectancy, raising the urgent issue of birth control of our population bomb. The treaty begins with pairs of small nations without mega corruption, militaries, and nukes to reverse. Increasing numbers of treaty nations maximize trade with each other and politely reduce commerce with the corrupt, warlike holdouts. As their prosperity declines, annoyed citizens vote out the militant fat cats and agitate for their constitutional reforms prerequisite to joining the treaty and their own safe, solvent, free future. Finally, instead of depression and World War III, humanity embarks on our second 2 million years of heavenly peace, thanks to freeing family love to go public with the necessary military and political constraints. Several of these speeches include stories of world-wrecking corruption we can end with simple new law. The first features my entertaining Texas governor. Seems that all political shenanigans prove again that allowing political bribery steals your money for their undeserving cronies. Our state capital's district attorney got caught drunk behind the wheel last year. She managed to hang on to her job by fessing up and going on the wagon, despite many, including our governor, howling for her scalp. She continued heading up a public integrity unit that looked into job-related ethics of state leaders. Texas government awards certain individual or company pros grants to conduct cancer research. The agency requiring each candidate to be fully vetted for scientific and other protocols. The besmirched DA discovered that several fly-by-night outfits got big research bucks, but little or no vetting. Surprise, surprise, the same boys who had funneled fat bucks to our governor's political party. Of course, that palm greasing had absolutely nothing to do with turning our watchdog agency into those contributors' lapdog, or springing our tax money for the dearth of cancer progress that malignant neglect invited. Of course not. The public hadn't yet smelled this stink, but we were quite resonant with the sensation of the drunken DA, many joining the chorus for her resignation. So our governor announced that she would either quit as DA and boss of the Public Integrity Unit, or he would veto every cent of its funding. She refused, and he carried out his threat excuse me, fast as he could before they could finish up and report out his government's business cronies' heartless ripoff of our taxes. So instead of her indicting party hacks for public theft, another DA indicted Governor Perry for threatening and coercing a public official. He may well be found innocent at trial. Probably ain't a felony to publicly bully a badly behaved public lawyer, especially a female alcoholic. There's no law against claiming that her arrest proved that she had no integrity to sic her integrity unit on his party's vile behavior. His obvious self-serving lie beside the point. And he has that legal veto power, of course. So we'll enjoy his next run for American president and hear all about the dastardly political vendetta against the governor, pure as the driven snow. The moral of this story. It's the same story you've heard since kindergarten. Empowerment of shameless con men and grifter grafters is allowed by you, who so far remain content to allow private thieves to buy your leaders and then steal your money, thanks to the outrageous legality of political bribery. I mean, contributions. My next story begins with another drunk driver, me. I was public enemy number one until my DWI conviction forced me to attach a booze blower to my ignition. Now you're safe from me, but about 15 million other unguarded drunks are weaving towards you as we speak. Lest you think my campaign cash obsession is a frivolous hobby, consider Steve's rule. All public safety is deliberately destroyed by profiteers paying politicians. Car companies have long since built dozens of devices to measure drivers' blood alcohol and block drunks from beginning or proceeding to drive. They expected government requirements to install this technology that could save 20,000 lives and 60,000 serious injuries every year. But a national spokesperson for Mothers Against Drunk Driving believes our government will never regulate this overwhelmingly necessary rescue. And we all know why. Because the booze and bar companies keep lobbying thousands of American legislators and executives on their campaign cash payroll that 15 million drunks kept off the roads between their businesses would seriously slash their profits. Our next 10 years of gifts only go to politicians who block such dangerous interference in our business. Dangerous interference. You might recognize the PR tactic perfected by Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister called the Big Lie. Our decade of war. History in my speeches. Our decade of war killed 7,000 Americans and 9/11, 3,500. History in my speeches not only connects political bribery from our war industry to all of those deaths, but our next decade of bribery to sideline car breathalyzers will kill 200,000 of us unless you support public campaign finance. Reason enough for you and I to demand that bad law be replaced with good law? Or do you need to reflect on the 330 million of us who will die of starvation once the electromagnetic pulse from a single stratospheric nuke knocks out our computers and trains and the entire agricultural growing and grocery selling operations? Eventually inevitable from the nuclear system and terrorists, both fostered by our war business government. Or is it more comforting, less bothersome, distracting, disturbing, and challenging to imagine that your children will not be among the 8 billion who will burn, freeze, or starve during the inferno and years of nuclear winter following even a cautious little war using a mere 15% of world missile arsenals? Insane extinction is built not by independent public servants or by voting citizens allowed supreme equal power, but by a commercialized, militarized, corrupted system of genocide for profit bribery. Every private dollar given to a no longer public servant requires him or her to support some private financial interest against our overall public interest, against our freedom, equality, security, solvency, safety, and eventually survival. So, boys and girls, send your cards and letters to our federal courts and judges, the only branch of government that hasn't yet been eaten by predators.